Hey, fuck that. I ain't doing that no more either. What's up, y'all? I'm gonna come in like that. I'm gonna just be like, hey, what's up, y'all? Hey, okay, so now I'm about to be reacting to journalist tries to corner Sowell. Instantly regrets it. Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell, y'all. Thomas Sowell. Whew. You know. Let's just react. You know, y'all know how I feel about Thomas Sowell. Y'all, if y'all been watching for a little while, y'all know. I don't got nothing against the man. He has his opinions. I have mine, but let's see what we get out of this one. Y'all subscribe, turn on post notifications, and let's get this on the road.
Yes, here is Bill Monroe. We'll continue the questions for Thomas Sowell with Emery King. Mr. Sowell, do you generally believe that black Americans are more conservative than they have been portrayed and perhaps more tolerant of President Reagan's administration? And if so, how would you support that view?
Well, I haven't done any research on black opinion as regards this particular administration. I know that when I've looked at the opinions of blacks on such things as crime control, on such things as quotas, on such things as busing, that I find that their views are quite different from the views that I see in the press from the civil rights leaders and leaders of black protest organizations. In fact, I'm just struck by how often the same people appear saying the same things, which are totally at variance with what the black population as a whole has said.
A recent NBC News documentary showed that black people nationwide are extremely concerned about the effects the administration's cutbacks in certain social programs will have on their lives. And in some cases, they're very...
It's just all just a rewrite. This is exactly what's going on right now with Trump. This is exactly what's going on right now with Trump. This is exactly what's going on right now with Trump. It's just interesting. It's just a rewrite. Reagan was Trump. Trump is now Reagan.
Ability to survive. Would you convince them in any way to be more trusting in a program that seems designed to benefit the rich at the expense of the poor?
Well, I wouldn't accept that characterization of the program because I wouldn't have even such small association with it as I do if I thought of it in those terms. I think that if you're going to take away anything from anybody, anywhere in the whole society, they're going to be apprehensive about it because they see immediately what they're losing. What they don't see is how this is going to help the economy and therefore help them as part of that economy.
Blacks have made more progress in the last 17 years than at any other time in history, progress that came about largely as a result of the government social programs during that period. Among them, affirmative action. What do you propose, or would you propose, as substitutes as we see the administration going about the business of...
I would disagree with you entirely on your facts. As I've looked at affirmative action, I do not see blacks or Hispanics rising relative to the general population under affirmative action. I think there are a lot of assertions and foregone conclusions that are stated over and over again, but repetition is not a substitute for facts. The fact is that under affirmative action, Puerto Rican income, for example, has fallen from 60% of the national average to 50% of the national average. Mexican American income has fallen from 76% to 73% of the national average. Black income has fluctuated right about where it was before affirmative action. When you break down the figures further, what you find is that those blacks who have education, who have years of experience on the job, are rising absolutely in relative to whites, but that those who are average and who don't have that level of education, they are falling relative to whites. So they are falling behind from before. I would not date the progress from 17 years ago, the 1964 Civil Rights Act I assume you're talking about. I think we need to go back 10 years before that. And in the preceding decade, blacks in high-level jobs more than doubled. What we're watching is a long-run trend based upon the rising skill level of the black population.
Mr. Eden?
Yep. Okay, I want to make sure you guys understand why, though. Because affirmative action didn't benefit mostly black people. It benefited mostly white women. That's the part he doesn't... I can't stand this guy for that fucking reason. Like, he doesn't tell the whole side of the story. Like, it benefited white women. That's why whites rised under affirmative action even more. Notice he said whites. Like, I'm going to say why that's very beneficial, because he's smart enough to know white men didn't rise under affirmative action. White women rise under affirmative action. So, like, the program benefited white people just as well as it benefited black people. But there's more white people in the country, so at a higher trajectory is going to be more white people that benefit. Just as well as, like, when you look at, like, welfare states. Like, not just welfare states, but, what's it called? Housing. I can't think of the name. I can't think of the name right now. But like when people go and buy low income housing, basically, like paid for by the government. I can't think of what the name is right now. But there are more white people. Section 8. But there are more white people on Section 8 than there are black people on Section 8. But per capita, more black people are on Section 8 than white people. You know, I make that argument. I made that argument in the video, and there's somebody's gonna try to like, oh, you said per capita. Well, we're talking about in generals right now, because that's what he was talking about in generals, right? Incomes have risen and fallen. There's other factors that play in, but there has been a surge in black wealth from 1920s till 2020. And to say that the black community was a lot wealthier then than it is now is bullshit. I wonder why we don't have that conversation. The black community is way wealthier now than it was then. We have way more millionaires in the black community, way more CEOs, way more people that are prominent in the black community. It wasn't as prominent as it is in 1920. Like, it just wasn't. So I don't know, like, but I could be wrong. Y'all could challenge me on that.
Yes, Mr. Sowell, what happened to the Black Alternatives Association that was talked about last winter when you and other black leaders met in San Francisco?
It was talked about by the press. And it was talked about inaccurately by the press. There was some talk informally and some consideration of setting up such an organization. Contrary to the Washington Post, no such organization was ever set up. It's a matter of public record. When an organization is incorporated, anyone who wants to check this out may check the public record and find that that's correct.
Well, do you believe there's a need for such an association?
I believe that there was a need, and there probably still is now. What I discovered was that I had more support than I was prepared to handle. That is, the volume of telephone calls, letters, and whatnot was just greater than I could possibly handle and still carry on the kinds of research which is my major work. And so I had to decide quite early on whether I'm going to continue with this or whether I'm going to change my career. I decided I simply could not do both things.
And why did you turn down a cabinet job?
Well, I have never had a desire to be in government in Washington or anywhere else.
But you're very busy in public policy.
That's true. That's very different from saying that I'm very busy in politics.
Mr. Cal?
I'm curious about one thing, sir. You have criticized the press on this broadcast so far, the leadership of the black community, white liberals, and saying that all of these people apparently have been talking inaccurately about the effect of these cutbacks upon the black community. And there are statistics put out by the government which talk about incredible figures, like more than 50% of black teenagers who are out of work now.
Yes.
Who's right and who's wrong? I mean, that statistic is rather shattering.
Of course it's shattering. It's more shattering if you look at the history behind it. Back in...
I don't trust this guy. But I'm going to see what he says, because this is hilarious. You can read into the history of one thing, but you don't read into the history of another. Like, this is the problem with intellectuals. It's not just him. It's intellectuals on the left, too. They're skewed. Like, I'll give you guys an example. Going away from here, right? Spankings to children, right? Disciplining children with spankings. If you really look... There was a study. I think his name was Gertrude. I can't say his name, but it's like a Gerucha. It's a G name, right? I'm gonna call him Mr. G. There was a study done by Mr. G that showed that spankings worked better than 11 to 12 forms of discipline, right? However, though, you have many spanking advocates on the other side saying spanking is abuse, and they dominate that conversation. Not saying you should spank your child. I'm just saying that spanking was better than most of the disciplines. It was better than most of the disciplines. The discussion should be, is there a balance that you can do within how to raise your child and how to discipline your child? That should be the balance, right? But there is no balance amongst the advocates. The advocates say no touching your child at all. None of that should happen. Keep talking to your child till they get it. I think because of that is why, like, the generations are the way they are. Because intellectuals are saying that this is what you should do. I'm right, you're wrong, right? But yet there's data to back the fact that they could be wrong. There's actually data to back the fact that they could be wrong. And that same thing ties into the economics in Thomas Sowell in a way. Like, I looked into both sides of the spanking conversation. Why isn't he looking into both sides of the black conversation? It's almost like he only talks about one side, and it's always pointing towards the negative towards black people. I don't know. It's just this guy. Like, I don't trust this guy's word. Like, just as much as I don't trust anything on MSNBC. I think MSNBC is very biased when it comes to anything. And I think Thomas Sowell sits in that realm to me. He does. Like, but I mean, y'all could debate me in that in the conversation.
Around 1950, that percentage was perhaps a fifth of what it has reached in the 1970s. And the reason that unemployment has risen, in my judgment, the judgment of a number of other people, has been that the minimum wage coverage has expanded greatly, as well as the minimum wage level itself rising, so that you simply price people out of a job. Many people think it's wonderful to raise people's salaries, but you can't raise their salaries. All you do is prevent them from working below a certain wage level. And if the employer doesn't agree to pay that level, they simply lose their jobs, and you're not making them better off, you're making them worse off.
So it's not clear to me what you would specifically recommend to help those black teenagers who would like to work, I'm certain,
Yes.
can't get the jobs.
I would recommend either that one repeal the law, if that were possible, or that one exempt the minimum wage law, the Fair Labor Standards Act, so-called. That one either repeal it, or that one have an exemption for teenagers, or as a third best possibility, that one have some lower minimum level, so that these youngsters can get on the ladder. Because if you don't get on the ladder, you don't rise up the ladder.
Do you feel that the press is generally misreporting or distorting the reality of black America?
Yes.
In what ways? Could you tell me and why?
I
How
would
does
say
that arise?
one, simply in having a relatively small group of people who are taken as the spokesman for the black population. And I see, as I say, people on the air saying things which are not only opposite to what I have seen in the black community, but opposite to what the Gallup organization and other pollsters have found as black opinions. Again, taking such things as crime control, that the traditional black organizations are taking a much more liberal stand on that as regards turning criminals loose and things of that sort, fighting against the death penalty and all. Then I find in the black community, again, either by my observation or by the polls that I've seen.
Why did that pop up? Ooh.
Oh, Mr.
Oh, was that the ad? That was weird.
Wouldn't the press normally go to leaders
That was weird, y'all.
of the established black organizations for spokesmanship, the NAACP, the Urban League? What would you say is the chief difference in approach toward the role of blacks in this country and the role of governments as related to blacks? The difference between you and the standard civil rights leaders we're accustomed to, the Brennan Jordans, the Benjamin Hooks, and others?
I would say that one enormous difference is that I have no financial stake in what I say. And obviously, if you're going to cut government spending and you're going to cut large sums of money that go to these organizations, they have a very large institutional stake in these programs, regardless of whether those programs do any good for blacks, and indeed, regardless of whether they cause harm for blacks. That's one big difference. Another difference, I think, is that I have a lot more confidence in what black people can do if given the opportunity than some of the other people seem to have. They seem to think that black people must either be led by the hand or else must be handed something directly by government. I think that once the opportunities are there, blacks have certainly made the most of such small opportunities as have been available historically. And I see no reason why we would not continue to make use of wider opportunities.
In Ethnic America and other writings, you put a great deal of emphasis on your disagreement with such programs as busing and affirmative action, school integration, or if not disagreement with, skepticism toward these things. But some of your critics have said you have not advocated any specific ideas or programs yourself that might end the gap in education and income between blacks and whites and result in black progress. What kind of ideas do you recommend, either to government or to blacks in general?
Let's see what he says. I'm really curious on this one. What is Thomas Sowell going to say to that question? That's a good question. You don't want affirmative action. You don't want any of these programs that help black people in any way, shape, or form. What programs or what ideas do you have that can help black people? Let's hear this. This is a good question. I really want to see what he's going to say. I'm genuinely going to listen.
I would recommend that more freedom be allowed, and freedom means that you cannot specify what steps are going to be taken. I mean, there's no way to have freedom on the one hand and a guarantee of what is going to happen on the other. For example, in occupational licensing is one of the areas in which I think blacks have been harmed very much by government. Now, in New York City, the taxi licenses cost $60,000. In Washington, D.C., they're $200. In New York City, I see mostly white cab drivers. In Washington, I see mostly black cab drivers. No one had to lead those black cab drivers by the hand down to the license bureau. Once the opportunity was there, they were there to take advantage of it.
What about the argument that if a group is disadvantaged,
He's asking good questions. Let him go.
freedom is not that much help, that the group needs help, needs government support of different kinds?
Mm-hmm.
Government support has not been effective, and in fact has been counterproductive in most areas that I've looked at, either in the United States or in other countries around the world. A great part of the disadvantage that blacks suffer under to this day has come about by government. Going back to the era of slavery, coming forward through the era of Jim Crow, and even to the present time in grossly inadequate education in the school systems across the country. If those young people come out of those school systems unprepared, it's not going to matter whether we follow liberal policies, conservative policies, or Marxist policies. They have to have those skills, they have to have that knowledge.
Mr. King?
Mr. Sowell, would you agree that history has shown us
I'm actually satisfied with that answer.
failed to take on those responsibilities, providing for upward black mobility and equality and justice, that no one did?
No, I would say just the opposite. That the government has been quite active in suppressing the advancement of blacks in the United States as well as in some other countries. That the great achievement of the civil rights organizations has been getting the government off the backs of blacks, notably in the South with the Jim Crow laws, but in other parts of the country with other kinds of laws and other kinds of practices. Where they tried to get government to play a positive role, so-called, that's where they've not only failed, but where they've had counterproductive results.
Are you confident that the private sector will hire more blacks in management positions, that white banks, for instance, will loan black businessmen money?
Banks usually do not finance the starting up of any kind of business, black or white. Everything that I've seen about the way the market operates tells me that people who have an opportunity to make money have the maximum incentive to try to make that money without regard to their kinds of prejudices. When I study the history of South Africa, for example, I find that prior to the nationalists taking power in South Africa, blacks were rising even in South Africa, even in the most racist country in the world. And it was necessary, and it's still necessary, for the Nationalist Party to maintain an incredible control of the economy in order to prevent blacks from rising.
I would challenge him saying that it's the most racist country in the world. I also would challenge the fact that, yeah, the nationalist whites there did try to prevent by creating apartheid in South Africa, right? But I would also say that there weren't enough whites to be able to enact a lot of it. They enacted it off of trickery, bribery, and all kind of things like that. In America, I think there are more whites to be able to enact these systems to make them even worse for anybody else. So, I mean, I would argue that, but I definitely think that would be a great conversation. This is actually one of the best interviews I've actually seen with Thomas Sowell. Like, he's sharp right now. He on it. I like this. I think, like, he is still alive, but if he was in his prime like that, we'd have a good debate. Like, I like what he's on right now. Going back to his plan, more freedom, yeah. Yeah, but wouldn't that, I think it would have to be able to start by rolling. Yeah, I agree with him a lot. I actually agree with him a lot on this one. Holy shit. Like, holy shit. Didn't see that coming. Oof.
Do you believe that it is a false precept that many black people have that racism is the major problem in America for them today?
I think that racism is a problem in America and throughout the world and down through history. The question is how much of the income disparities that we see can be attributed to that. The work that I've done over the past 10 years has forced me to the conclusion that far less of it than I would have thought, or than most other people would have thought, can be attributed to that cause.
What the political activity?
All right. That was a good video. I still challenge him. I think that racism does play a huge factor in it. I mean, the complication of being able to go getting something done and being able to feed your family, or like for example, I'll give you guys a really good example. Like football coaches back in the day, if you were a black football coach back in the day and you lost one game, you were fired. Now imagine that type of, like, that's impossible to ask somebody to do. It's impossible. You're going to lose games. But one sign of trouble, you were fired. So taking on a head coaching job was risky. Very, very risky, you know. Some jobs, the first workers that went were blacks. Some jobs wouldn't even hire blacks. Some places had areas where there were colored bathrooms and white bathrooms. Like the woman who helped build the space shuttle that got, well, I think went to the moon, I think. I want to say went to the moon. She was black, and she had to walk all the way across campus in order to use the bathroom. These kind of things make it a little more complicated in society. Just the dignity part. I don't think you can fully go out there and do what you got to do every day when you're constantly worried about your dignity being challenged. Anyways, y'all comment down below what y'all think. I'm out.